Two, one. Nikki, thank you so much for joining me. I've been excited about this conversation for quite some time now, but first off, how are you doing?
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me on the show. I mean, this has been a long time coming. I feel like I've really been looking forward to this, and there were so many obstacles in the way, but it's finally happening, and I could not be more excited. I'm doing great. I'm really, really happy to be there. Thank you so much for having me.
Definitely. And I know last time we spoke, your toddler was a little sick, but hopefully he's doing better. Is
Oh,
that right?
yeah, he's doing better now. It's just, it's never ending when you have little kids. Like it just never ends, Sam. Never ends. Do you have kids? I don't even know. Do you have kids?
I do not. I am engaged. So I get actually
Congrats.
married in South Florida in about 38 days, something like that.
Amazing.
we get
That's so
married in,
exciting.
yeah, we get married in Coconut Grove. So
Oh,
you probably
cool.
know the area.
Yeah, totally.
Um, but with you, I wanted to start back from the beginning and talk about what your childhood was like and growing up in Florida. So the first question, what was your childhood like?
Oh my gosh, Sam. So like I am a proud Miami girl, right? Like I love my city. I love being from here, the melting pot, just like all the different cultures that I was exposed to growing up. My mom was Puerto Rican and my dad is American, and I grew up in a town called Kendall, which A-Rod, it was so crazy. Yesterday, A-Rod like went on whatever interview he was on, and he's like, yeah, I grew up in the hood, and it's this town called Kendall, and everybody from Kendall is like rolling their eyes, like it's not the hood, like it's definitely like a suburb in Miami, but it's just so funny to hear somebody say that. But I love representing Kendall, and specifically West Kendall. Went public school my whole life, and I had a really, you know, man, I there's the duality of life in most things. So like I had a really beautiful childhood in so many ways, but like there was also a lot of trauma and a lot of like really difficult experiences that went down that I'm able to acknowledge in hindsight and see them for what they were. I think as kids, and it's so important for adults to really, and parents to have an awake, a sense of alertness and awakeness that we can see the environments that we're creating, because I think it's hard to do in the moment. And now as an adult, I look back and I can see like, okay, that wasn't normal. But children, a lot of times
Mhm.
we roll with the punches. We're so resilient. Kids are so resilient. And so you see your circumstances and this is all you've ever known about life. So that's what's normal to you. So the chaos and the trauma and the abuse, for what it's worth, because that's what it was very real. And I always want to be very clear that you can have had, or I mean, I like to speak in I's a lot, but I think in a general way, like you can have had some really traumatic childhood experiences and also say, yes, there was some beauty in it. There was some love in it. We're like plants, like you find the sunlight no matter what.
Mhm. Was with your childhood, do you remember feeling anxious or having anxiety as a child?
I do. I had a lot of anxiety growing up. I think that like, my dad was a firefighter and paramedic, and he's an amazing human being. But the reality is that like he worked 24 hours on at the fire station, and then he had 48 hours off. So like he wasn't there for 24 hours.
Mhm.
And there's plenty of especially paternal figures in the home that are away from the home more frequently. And I think that's changing a little bit now. But for what it's worth, my dad was away for 24 hours. And so I had to kind of like learn, I'm like, okay, daddy leaves and he comes back, and daddy leaves and comes back. And that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It was just like how I adapted to life. I don't have any brothers or sisters. So there was a lot of times that it was just me and my mom. And the first like 4 years of my life, um, it's weird because I don't, people don't think, I don't think a lot of people can remember things before the age of 4, but
Mhm.
like I do. It's so crazy. Like I remember being very happy. And I remember like a distinct period in my life where things started to shift. And it was around the time I was 4. And knowing what I know now, I know that my mom, who she's recently passed, she passed away in February 18th, and we're in March now. So it's been a little bit over a month. And I've made my peace with her. So I feel very comfortable talking about all these things. But like at that time in my mom's life, when I was around 4, she lost her job. And I think that she lost her sense of identity at that point in time. And so things kind of started to change. I think that she became depressed and she didn't really know who she was. And so there was a lot of that like started to fall on me in direct and indirect ways. And, you know, life is like, man, life happens so fast, Sam, right? Like you're just on the train and you just keep going. And it's really like one thing just happens after the other, good and bad things, right? That you're just kind of like putting one foot in front of the other. And I think that something that I know as a parent now is like, we're all doing our best. Like there's no parent manual. There's a million books you can read, fine, sure, whatever. And there's data for days, right? But when it comes down to it, when you're in the thick of parenting, like it's all of our first time doing this. Like there's no real handbook about how you need to do it, right? Because every person is unique. Every child is unique. And so I do truly believe that even in our worst of days, like we're all just doing our best, man.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard. It's not easy. And like, I think it takes a huge level of awareness to be able to sit and self-reflect. And I don't, I think, I was born in 87 and like, it's so crazy. Like now the 20-year-olds, it's like they were born in 2000.
Yeah.
And
I think I was born in 88. I'm with you.
But it's like, I think to myself, like people, we just like our generation of parents weren't totally awake to these things. Like they did things how their parents did things. And so that was the way, and you didn't really question it. And there wasn't a lot of dialogue. There wasn't a lot of self-reflection. There wasn't like a lot of asking, wait, how are you doing? For the most part, we're still in like a world where children should be seen and not heard. And I'm not saying that I was silenced, because I don't think as a child that I gave anybody like permission to silence me as a child. I was like very like expressive from the beginning of my life. And later, if you want to, we can talk about how I found that expression. But the days between my mom and I, they got really, really toxic for a bit. And it was really hard to deal with. There were a couple things that happened. I dealt with some sexual abuse. And then, my mom was in a space where I think she just lost herself so much that her drinking got completely out of control. And there was a lot of verbal and emotional abuse there too. So,
were your mom and dad together for the most of your childhood?
Yeah, my parents were together till I was 18. And throughout those years, like I would say like from 4 to 18, like the drinking had gotten progressively worse and worse and worse over the years, to the point that like, I would take care of my home, when my dad was away. And like, I try to talk to him about this sometimes. He doesn't love it because, I think everybody has their own subjective reality. Right. And like, He was doing the best he could. Like he had to provide for us. Like he wasn't maliciously not home. He was legitimately working, so that he could take care of us. But the reality is that he wasn't there. So like a lot of my childhood became like taking care of the home, locking up the house, making sure the alarm was set, making sure the dog went out and came back in. And like most of the time, like tucking my mom in, not the other way around. And as a parent now, and somebody who's like done years and years of therapy, like I know that that is not the responsibility of a child. Mm-hmm. Like no child should ever have those responsibilities where they're taking on a parent role. Again, like I didn't have any siblings. I wasn't like talking about this with friends. If I talk with my friends now, they're like, I had no idea that this stuff was going down.
Yeah.
Like, sure, every family has their stuff, but it's like, I just became so fiercely independent, and that served me well in so many ways down the road into like my adolescence, early adulthood, and now into like my life and who I feel like I am today,
Yeah. And you said something that reminded me something of my mom, and she said it to me a couple months ago. And we were talking about a bunch of my friends having kids and,
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of young ones running around. And I asked her like, what's a great piece of advice for young parents? And she said to give yourself grace, to realize like, right, you're doing the best you can. It's all unique to your experience. So if you can just like give yourself a little bit of a break, give yourself some grace, that will go a long way. But, it's not an experience I've had, but I bet for you, that's probably a lot harder done than said.
Yes, I actually like got to a place. I was so resentful growing up, like so resentful. Like I had a chip on my shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a chip on my shoulder for as long as I can remember, honestly, Sam. Like I really have, and it's taken a lot for me to work on that as a grown woman today. But I was so angry as a child. And listen, I had legitimate reasons to be angry. Like I know that today. I also didn't have like proper coping mechanisms. Like
Mm-hmm.
I did not know how to cope with my anger or my feelings. Thank goodness I found a path into dance and painting and fashion design, and that became my outlet where I could express myself. Oh my gosh, music carried me through my teen years, like really, like, and it's a gift sometimes I think that like I got to connect with music in that way because it helped me. It was like my ability to attach my body to sound and be
Mm-hmm.
able to get it out in whatever way possible, and I had my fair share of like experimentation as a teenager, and I wasn't by any means an easy teen. Um, but I got through it and I stayed, I think, okay. I think what we do as humans, as people, is we find a way to cope no matter what. Right. So even if we don't have healthy coping strategies, we develop strategies, whether they're healthy or not.
Mm-hmm.
And even the unhealthy things serve us because they protect us from in some capacity. Right. For me, it was my ability to forget some of the things that happened. Like I literally would like shut my brain off to some of the things that happened because that was my brain saying, you can't live in this emotion for so long because it's poison for you. So my brain was like, we're just going to push that to the side. We're not even going to process it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but it was always there. Right.
Yeah. And it was probably building up, right?
Oh my
Like
gosh. Over time.
definitely when you're not talking about it. And you made a great point about music. I mean, I remember, when in my darkest days, right? And we all still have bad days. I mean, even to
Mhm.
this day, I will use music as like a mood booster or just like to get me out of that funk or that feeling, put on one of my favorite songs and just sing. And it makes you feel so much better. What was your first love in the arts? Was it dance? Was it fashion? Was it music? Do you remember?
I think it was music, and music was like my gateway to dance.
What was your favorite artist growing up?
Oh, I loved still to this day, I love the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was like the By the Way album and the Californication album. So the By the Way, that album was like the gateway to Californication and Blood Sugar Sex Magic. And then that just like created a lifelong love of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. But I liked a lot of the old stuff. I liked the Beatles. I listened to the Beatles. I listened to Leonard Skinner. I listened to Pearl Jam, Def Leppard, like all of these rock and roll. Aerosmith carried me a lot, like, and I got to see Aerosmith in concert, which is really cool, and the Chili Peppers, of course, but like those aren't even like, oh, and Elton John, but I like those aren't
There
even
you
like
go.
heavy like dance music. Like that is not
They're
like a heavy
not.
dance music, but it was what like made me feel something. Like it really tapped into my feelings. And then, like I was a kid, like I was in middle school and high school and I listened to popular music. And so I did what the kids do, but I found a way into dance. I was a competitive cheerleader, which is like this whole, like, it's like a cult of competitive cheerleading. I don't know how much you know about it, but I was on a program called Top Gun All Stars, and they're like the best of the best to this day. And what that taught me was like teamwork and being part of something bigger than myself. And that really became like a family for me. Like I would be the first person at the gym after school and the last person to leave at night, like to the point that they're like closing the garage doors because it's in a big warehouse. And they're like, okay, you got to go home now. But they always let me come early and they always let me stay late. And I just
Mm-hmm.
practice and practice and practice by myself, and I did my homework there and I would eat my meals there. And it was a safe haven for me.
Yeah, it made you feel safe. I tell people all the time, I mean, I was a big soccer player and I played really any sport I could play. And I think that was such an amazing like growth experience
Mhm.
for any, young kid to be a part of a team, learn how to be coachable, learn how
Yeah.
to get along with others, like learn how to do teamwork and like, all be together going towards one accomplishment. Like those are big I think life learning experiences for kids. And it sounds like you got that through cheerleading. And just like you said, it was probably a safe haven for you to be able to be there. I bet you felt good, part of a team, when maybe at home it was more of a difficult situation. So you're almost being able to get away from that a little bit.
Yes. And I also think that what happened is like, I became like the shining star of my family. So it was like this weird thing, like the better I did, the more love I received. So like, I wanted to be better and I wanted to be more. And like, because I knew that the more I was a star on my team or whatever, like the more attention and affection and love and acceptance I would receive. And
Did
so,
you, did you go to school for dance?
No, I
No.
didn't. I joke this. I mean, I guess this is like the Kendall like hood reference that I made before, but it's like, I learned in the streets. I'm like, yeah, the streets of Kendall, like not in the real streets, but like I did, like, I kind of taught myself. I wanted to learn so much. So I'd watch the videotapes, like the VHS of like other dancers and other dance teams. And I'd be like, okay, I'm going to do it, because I didn't get to go to like proper dance training. So I trained myself in how to do these things.
Yeah.
But like somehow that got me to always be like the captain of the team and front and center and, like the leader position on the team. Mostly because I worked so hard and I was like relentless. I would never give up. And I was like obsessed. Like I became obsessed with like technique. Even if I didn't have a teacher telling me what the technique was, I was like I was pretty determined to figure it out.
All right. So you go to school and you obviously still have a love for dance. Because you became a teacher.
Yeah.
Did you become a teacher right out of college or right out of school?
So like I'm so blessed, Sam, with like a very creative family. Like my grandma and my aunts, they were all like very artistic and they taught me how to paint. My grandma taught me how to sew. And so in high school, I learned how to sew and I like thought I was super into fashion. And so I would like decided that I would have a fashion show when I was 17, because this is how I thought. I'm like, why not? Like, why not me? Like that was my thought process. And like, looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to bottle that shit up and drink it today, because like there's so many, I like kid myself out of so many things. I talk myself out of doing so many things. I mean, it took years for me to find my way to podcasting, but like I was so fearless. And I was like, well, of course I can have a fashion show because I can do anything. Hello. Like if you told me money, I'm like, well, who cares? I don't have money. I'll figure it out. I don't have a location. I'll figure it out. I'll convince people to believe in me because I believed in myself so much. I really did. And, that was a great time in my life, but I wound up having a fashion show of like 54 complete looks that I created myself on my grandma's sewing machine.
Wow.
School. And I charged like $5 a ticket. And I raised like $2,000 for Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Miami, who I now work with all these years later. And so that got me a scholarship to the Art Institute in Miami, where I studied fashion design. And then I realized I don't want to run a fashion business. I really just like being creative. Mm-hmm. So I transferred to FIU, Florida International University, and I got my art history degree. And I was dancing for the Miami Heat during that time. And so I was still dancing. I was teaching dance to little kids, and I was studying art history in school. And I was working at a high fashion clothing boutique. So I was like checking all these boxes right in my own way. I'm like, I work at a fashion store where I get to style all these rich women. Mm-hmm. And I teach dance to little kids. I'm a professional dancer, and I'm going to school and studying art history.
You're doing a lot. Yeah.
I was doing a lot, and I was working and I was paying for my bills and all that stuff in college. But after college, I was like, I gotta figure out what I'm going to do with this degree. So I moved to Los Angeles and I like knocked on every gallery's door begging for a job. And finally a gallery hired me, and I worked in sales, art sales, right after college. Cool. And I made a ton of money doing that. And that was like, I had never made that kind of money ever. And I was 24, 25 years old, making over like, I don't know, like I think I hit 100K at that time. And that's like a lot for anybody, but
yeah, it's a lot for, definitely for 24
anybody, right? But like at that time I was like, holy shit, like the sky's the limit here, like with sales. And I can't believe it was like really crazy to me because I didn't come from a world where people like spent that kind of money. on art or anything for that matter. So it was a little bit of a hard adjustment. Like I kind of felt very superficial. Like even though I was making really good money, I was like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, you're selling this piece for,
right.
a piece for thousands and thousands of dollars. A lot of times that doesn't make sense.
It doesn't, but not always. But it was also that chip on my shoulder where I was like resentful, right? I was like so resentful of like everything. And so I was really resentful of people that had money for whatever reason, because I always felt like this underdog. So I'm like, oh, I'm selling to these people who have all this money to spend, and I'm here struggle busing and like this, I'm like doing all this like to save my money so I could create a better future for myself and all this stuff. I later, like now I have such a great appreciation for the arts, and I'm actually a very good art salesperson now.
I believe it.
I have a different perspective on the whole thing, but that chapter came to a close because I was not really fulfilled. I kind of felt like I was selling cars. Not that that's a problem, but I felt like there wasn't so much meaning behind it for me.
Yeah, the authenticity behind it.
Right. So I was like, you know what can I do that I can check all these boxes of the things that make me happy? And that's when I got my certification to become a teacher. I was a 7th grade English language arts teacher, and I had an art club at the school where we did like fashion and painting and art and like graffiti style street art type stuff. And then I coached the dance team, and I took a bunch of like,
you're still checking those boxes.
I was like, right. I was like, I'm going to find a way to like make it all happen. And I took, I think it was like 13-year-old girls and one boy that didn't have a ton of dance experience. And together we worked so hard, and that team became national champions by their like 3rd year. And it was so, so rewarding. And then by that time I had gotten married, and my husband and I were starting our family, and I took a break from teaching after that.
Did you also become teacher of the year at one point?
I did. Yeah, that was amazing. That was nominated by my colleagues and the administrative staff. And
what do you think your greatest asset was to being a teacher? And I think I might know from speaking with you for 25 minutes, but what do you think it was?
I think it was my ability to connect with students, like and make them feel something. So like I go all in on a performance, right? Like in some capacity, teaching was a stage for me, right? So we were teaching novels, and my goal was to create a love of reading for kids, especially because I did teach in the hood in Little Havana, like an actual like hood, which is like not the Kendall hood, like the actual hood in Little Havana. And it was, like some of these kids took like 4 city buses to get to school, and they like.
Isn't that amazing? Like people think they have it bad, and they can get a different perspective. And it's like mind blowing what some people have to go through
just to like do the bare minimum.
And they do it, and they don't complain about it a lot of times.
So my goal was like, I knew that like a lot of these kids wouldn't be, I would come home crying like the first couple of days. I'm like, these little children are dealing with so much, right? And it's so hard. And so I was like, a lot of these kids are not being read to at home, and they're not like, they don't have like the nurturing, not because their parents are bad, but because their parents are like working 2-3 jobs, to provide for their kids. So if I'm reading a novel to the kids, I'm like acting it out. I'm adopting the voice. I'm making it a big show. And I don't know. I think that I guess my gift as a teacher was like to be able to really, really connect with kids and make them want to learn and make them feel something about what they were learning. Like, and helping them give a shit about what they're learning.
And it kind of goes along with what you're saying, but I was thinking it's probably your energy, right? The way you can connect with individuals or kids, but like the energy you probably bring to the room, to whatever y'all were studying that day or like going over that day. The children could probably feel your energy and like your passion behind, whatever it was with that daily task or activity during school.
Yeah, and I definitely like, I want to go say like I always come back to like duality being a theme in life in general, but it's like, I definitely wasn't the most likable teacher. Like I wasn't the favorite teacher because I was a hard ass. Like I was super strict and I had like no tolerance for the BS that like teenagers bring to the table sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
And so I was really, really strict, and that was hard for people. But I think that all of us inherently, without realizing, like, especially in our formative years, like structure and like discipline, even if we don't think we do. Like we liked predictability. We like being able to know what we're getting into.
Definitely like a routine. We like that.
Right. Like the structure is almost safe. So even if it's hard structure, you're like, okay, but this is structure,
Yep.
right?
And you
In a
almost can
world where
expect
I
it,
might
so
not
you
have a
can
lot.
plan for it a little bit. You can know it's coming, so it doesn't catch you off guard, that sort of stuff. Like people, when they start feeling uncomfortable, when they don't expect something to happen, that's when things can start fall apart.
Yeah.
With
Cool.
you mentioned you got married, so you met your husband and y'all got married, and then y'all started to have some wonderful kids. Was that something you always wanted to do, was to have kids?
No. You know, my relationship with my mom was so, you know, toxic for so many years. I was so scared of becoming a parent. Like I did not actually want kids. And I don't even think it was something that like we really talked about, because I think, you know, it's weird. I think that I like on some level did want children, but my fear had clouded me so much that I was like, I can't be a mom.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was less about like having kids, and it was more like, I can't be a mother. Like I'm not good enough to be a mother. So if I
Do you
reflect,
remember why you thought that?
I think it was because of my upbringing. Like I just thought I was going to be like my mom. I was so scared of losing myself that I was scared of like hating who I was as a person. Um, that I wouldn't be able to be a good parent, you know? And so when I found out that I was pregnant, I was really, really scared. Like I was scared. I was like, this can't be happening. And it was what it was, you know, we went through it, and I like have had my first son. And I mean, it changed, obviously, it sounds so cliche, but it changed my life. Like it
Mm-hmm.
really, really did. It was really hard. It was a really hard transition for me into motherhood. Like all of my feelings about my childhood came up. I experienced really bad postpartum anxiety. It was hard. I was drinking a lot to cope.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, drinking heavily, you know, and I was so lonely in a way. Like motherhood, the early days of motherhood, and I don't know that everybody feels like this, but I think that all mothers can relate in some level to those early days being really lonely. Like you're up at these odd hours of the night, like to be with your baby and feed them and just take care of them, and it's really lonely. And
Was
like your
that
body goes through so many changes and all of it.
was the so was your main coping mechanism, you think, drinking?
Totally. And like being angry, which
Yeah.
made me drink more. Like not made me, like I coped with my anger and my resentment with drinking.
During this time, were you opening up to anybody? Were you letting anybody know how you felt? Were you seeing a therapist, anything like that?
I was seeing a therapist, but I wasn't admitting anything about my drinking. Like I didn't talk about it. Like
Sure.
I wasn't even aware of it at the time. Like now in hindsight, I'm like, oh yeah, you were totally doing that.
Yeah.
Like, right. At the
It's
time,
very
I was
hard
like,
in the moment to recognize it.
absolutely. At the time, I was like, I'm a mom. I'm by myself. My husband travels for work. I'm alone. I can't go leave the house. So I made as well. I got the kids to bed, and I deserve a glass of wine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that glass of wine over time became 2 and 3 and 4 bottle plus, you know, and that meant I was waking up not really wanting to wake up. Like, I'm like, I don't want to wake up. I don't want to get the kid, like my son up. I don't want to, you know, and I would do it and I'd be like groggy and just not present and so irritable and impatient.
Totally not yourself, probably.
No, but the sad thing and the crazy thing is like that was becoming myself, right? That was becoming, the more you do anything is like the more you become that thing.
that is the crazy thing to think about. Like, I've had tough times, similar drinking or taking prescription drugs. And you do look back at it, and you're like, I can't believe I was in that state of
It's-
mind. But at the time, it was kind of just like you said, like you're on a wheel, and you just
Mm.
wake up every day and kind of go along with it, and you don't ever really recognize kind of the extent of what you're doing on a daily basis with that.
And it didn't dawn on me till after I had my second son.
I was going to ask you with that, what was the time, or what happened for you to decide to get help or get treatment?
So I went through both my pregnancies and I never drank during my pregnancies. I mean, I might have had they say it's safe to have like a glass of wine every once in a while. Like maybe I had two throughout my entire pregnancy, right? Like a half glass of wine. And that was torture. That was torture. Like I remember thinking, like, I remember being pregnant and being like, I hate this. I hate this. I just want to drink. I hate this. And then as soon as I would have the baby and be like past my breastfeeding stage where I wasn't giving the baby my breast milk anymore, I was like off to the races. And I would invite my girlfriends over because I wasn't going out. And like I only invited the girlfriends who could drink like I could because I needed a companion to do this with, right? And I was fortunate enough, you know, like it's a blessing and a curse, right? Like it ultimately is a blessing. Like we had at the time we had 24/7 childcare for the baby, and in a way that I guess that might have enabled me a little bit, but also thank God that like I had somebody to help me with my kids, right? And that's not to say that I was being neglectful. Like that's not the case at all. You know, like you hear these horror stories. I'm like, definitely wasn't like neglectful. I was doing this like to me,
Yeah.
right? Like nothing bad was like happening in my external life, right? I now know, like I work a program of recovery, and I now know like that everybody hits a different type of rock bottom, right? From the outside, like I have a high bottom. I didn't lose a job. I didn't lose my marriage. I didn't lose my kids. I wasn't doing anything that was like compromising the safety of anyone, you know? But I hated myself, and that's pretty significant.
Yeah. And
I hated myself.
was there a time when somebody stepped up to confront you about it, or was it something that you figured out on your own?
You know, I think like for so many years, like, you know, my husband and I would be like, we fight when we drink. You know, so we're just not gonna like, maybe we need to put a cap on it, right? If we argue when we drink, and it was a lot of time it was a we thing. And so like I'd watch my drinking around because I always wanted the night to go well. I didn't really ever think that I had like a problem. And I certainly did not think that he has a problem. And to this day, I don't think he has a drinking problem at all, like in any capacity. Like I do not think that, but, like it would come up like that, you know, nothing crazy. I was also like a highly functional drinker, and I
Yeah.
could hide it really well. And I could go like a day or two without drinking. Like it wasn't like I was drinking when I woke up. Like I was never that person. I'm not saying my alcoholism is superior to anybody else's alcoholism, but I am saying that like my journey wasn't that I would wake up and have a drink. I wasn't like drinking throughout the day, all day long. I would just like at night be so uncomfortable in my own skin as a human being, and I needed the pain to stop. And so I would just drink until I could fall asleep, you know?
Do you think you were ever trying to cope with your anxiety for your drinking? That's why I drank a lot, because I
Really?
would feel so anxious and feel like
Yeah.
crawling in my skin of whatever I was going on. And so I had an issue with Xanax, which was, you know, a very extreme anti-anxiety medicine. And that was my fix. That was like what cured my anxiety at that point, even though it ended up making more anxiety.
Yeah.
But then I got sober from Xanax, but I was still drinking. And one of my therapists told me one day that drinking is very similar to Xanax, but it takes 8 drinks to kind of get the feeling of what a Xanax was. And so that's what clicked for me was now instead of coping with Xanax, I'm just coping with 8 drinks instead of, you know, the one pill, which made me decide like, you know, I was going through treatment and therapy and all that sort of stuff as well. But that's when it clicked like, oh my goodness, I've just transitioned to a new drug and alcohol to cope with my anxiety. So I think the root of a lot of my addiction was from anxiety. I didn't know if that was maybe similar to you.
I think I've always my whole life struggled with anxiety, and I had gone through like different phases of like taking meds to help me with my anxiety. Um, and periods of time where I wasn't, and I was like in a better space. And like the goal ultimately for me is like, I would love to get to a place still in my life where I don't need medication at
Mm-hmm.
all. But my current reality is that like I do suffer from legitimate anxiety, and it's best for me, even still as a sober woman, to follow my prescription like to the T.
Sure. I
And
take 2 dailies every day.
unfortunately, like for whatever reason, the way my brain is wired, like I don't have like an addiction to my anxiety medication. Like I don't like, it's not a
Mm-hmm.
thing. Like it's a very structured thing for me. My thing was the alcohol. Like that was the primary. It's like it was a disease of the mind and the body. Like it really is for
It
me,
is. Yeah.
where like that's how I know. So I mentioned something before, Sam, about like during my pregnancies, it was like torture not drinking. Like since I've been sober, and on April 18th, God willing, I'll have my 2 years of sobriety, one day at a time.
Let's go.
But I don't suffer like that anymore. I'm not like constantly like, how am I going to drink? How am I going to hide that I'm
Mm-hmm.
drinking? Where am I going to have 20 minutes on hand so that I don't smell like I'm drinking? Like I don't struggle with that. I don't even think, thank God, I don't even think about alcohol.
Yeah.
But like, I look at my years, the years that I spent pregnant, suffering because I wasn't sober. I was dry. I wasn't drinking, but I wasn't sober in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't emotionally sober. I wasn't like working a program that like where I was connected to God and like of my understanding. And I wasn't like dealing with my resentments and with my like personal defects of character. Like I wasn't looking at any of those things. Everything was everybody else's fault.
Yep.
So
What do you currently do now as coping mechanisms, or your routine, wellness, anything like that?
I write a lot. I talk to my therapist is like my lifeline, and thankfully I've also learned like, okay, I hate that I even said that, like lifeline. It's just because I think my lifeline is my relationship with God, more than any external person. I think that God is my lifeline now, but I do see a therapist regularly where I can talk about and like assess my feelings and why I'm feeling them. DBT therapy was really, really helpful for me.
What is that?
Dialectic
Okay.
behavioral therapy. And it like really, it gives you tools. Like I remember getting so sick of talk therapy. Sometimes I'm like, okay, like I talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so what?
Yeah,
Now what? I need a strategy. Like I need you to tell me what to do. Like, so DBT therapy taught me like so many great tools. And it actually was then, and that was like in between my 2 pregnancies, that I was like, you have to fill out a form every day about like where your level of anger was, anxiety, happiness, all these things, like what your scope of feelings, like what level were they at today? How did you cope? And it gives you like all of these like things that you can do to cope. There's like all these strategies, like methods you can do, like stop action, like reverse reaction, like all of these like methods that were so helpful to me. But it would ask, did you drink alcohol today? And I would lie on the paper. That was like the first time that I realized, oh, I'm lying about my drinking, because I know somewhere inside that it's a problem.
Yeah.
And
You're
then
probably
shame.
hiding it too, like.
Right. So I'd go to my therapist in the morning and be like, two drinks last night. But it was a lie.
Yeah.
I was lying. So that really like that opened my eyes, like putting that on paper. So, but like, I still take a lot of those tools. I don't do DBT therapy anymore, but I still take a lot of those tools with me and I apply them into my everyday. And I adopted a meditation practice. And you know what, Sam? The biggest thing that helps me is like, honestly, it's my podcast. It's like having something that I feel in some capacity is helping somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So for anybody who's familiar with a 12-step program, like the pillar of it is to serve another person who is sick and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And like, I do that in my way. And my way is like, I have like empowering, real, authentic conversations with people.
Yep.
And I hope that like by doing so, right, and hopefully we're doing that right now, you know, somebody's ears perk up and they say, wow, I'm not alone
Yeah.
in this. And so my podcast, starting this business, oh my gosh, I'm almost a year in. I need to write these things down because then I forget. But like I've been doing it almost for a year now, and I'm like, this makes me feel really good.
It does.
You know, it makes me so happy. My kids walk into my office and they're like, Mommy, are you doing a meeting? And so I'm like always on meetings, right? Like all types of meetings. I go to all kinds of meetings. But they like come and they play with my microphone and they ask me if I'm working, and it makes me feel good for them to see me doing something that means a lot to me.
Was there a time from your support system? Like how did your husband support you when you decided to go sober, like as a partner?
That was really hard. Most people were blindsided by the fact that I was identifying as an alcoholic because I hid it so well. Like I really hid it so well. So it was like a very, like I talked about being lonely before, like it was a very lonely time for me to come out about my alcoholism, because like my dad was like, I don't think you're an alcoholic. I think you drink every once in a while. I'm like, right, because I'm lying to you. Like you're not here in my body and you don't see what I'm doing. Like the reality is that my husband would travel for work, you know? And so like, I might've had one or two drinks when he was home and we went out to dinner.
Yeah.
But like when I was by myself, like he wasn't there to see that. And like, that was really messed up for me because I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what my mom did. Right. Like that's what my mom did. My dad would be at the fire station. My mom would drink like this.
Yeah. And hide it. Right.
Right. And pretend everything was okay. You know, and I started to really like put the two and two together where I was like, oh my gosh, like this is the same thing that's happening. So I think at first he was like frustrated. I think, you know, I hate to speak for him, but I think at first it was really frustrating for him because I think he didn't know enough about it at the time, you know,
like
I think
many people don't.
Right. Like we all have this idea. And here's one of the things like I do want to touch on is like, I'm open about my sobriety because, and I think that first of all, I want to say that anonymity is the spiritual foundation for so many people as they pursue their sobriety. And I think that that's really important. And I know early on that like I struggled because my anonymity was compromised against my will. You know, like people in meetings and stuff would put it together and ask me questions. And I felt like my anonymity was compromised in that way. And it wasn't until I made a decision to come out about my sobriety and my alcoholism that I was like, okay, I'm going to take ownership of this because I know for a fact, had I not seen other women that like looked like me, who had the things that I had, who I had what they had what I wanted, right? Like other women with young children, like women that I respect in the community. If I never learned that they were living sober, like I don't think I would have gotten help.
Yep. My dad wrote me a letter in treatment, and it's still, I tell people when I talk with people that are thinking about going sober, they've reached out because they want to get sober, they're going through treatment. But my dad wrote me a letter and it mentioned at the time, Michael Phelps, and it mentioned Robert Downey Jr. and it mentioned Elton John, and it mentioned all these amazing individuals that I had been looking up to that are living sober and still like accomplishing anything they want in their life. And to me, that was a big moment, being like, oh my goodness, like I'm kind of just like Elton John, or I'm kind of like Michael Phelps, you know? So that was a big moment for me. But just like you said, like you see these individuals that are sober in life. And I, you know, whenever I think during the Super Bowl, and there was all those performers on stage, I think almost half of those performers were sober, which was like really cool to me. I think it was Mary J. Blige and Eminem. And
it was so cool to me too.
Yeah. So like that was, you know, little things like that. It's just like eye-opening to people that might not recognize that.
Totally. And the thing is like, sometimes those people are so far away, right? Like I can totally see myself back in my drinking days being like, okay, well, I'm not Mary J. Blige and I don't have all the resources that Mary J. Blige has. So that's really unattainable. But like seeing another like woman who was normal and regular, just a regular woman who I happen to think was amazing, say that she was an addict and that she's now been sober. Now she has 15 years of sobriety. I'm just like, I want that. Like,
Yeah.
I can have that. Like, it's realistic for me. This is relatable. Like, she overcame this. I can overcome it too. And so for me, deciding to be public about my sobriety was a thing too for me and my husband,
Yep.
And you had asked me like, how did he cope with it? He got on board. He definitely got on board. At first it was tricky because he doesn't have a drinking problem. He's not addicted to alcohol. He can have one drink and stop and have it be normal, have it be
It's
okay.
like my fiance. Yeah. Very similar.
Right. So at first it was very triggering for me because like we were navigating how to like share space in a way that felt safe and respectful, and then also didn't feel like he was in trouble for drinking, and we got to a really good, like we got into a good groove about how we would go about it. And there's times where I'm like, hey, I'm in a mood right now, like, and I'm feeling really triggered, and are you comfortable with like not having any wine with your dinner or something like that? And I can ask him that, and he sees it for what it is. And he's like, totally, because guess what? He doesn't need wine to cope.
Yep.
Like he can say like, no, I'm good. Yeah, totally. Like, I don't need to have this glass of wine. I do think that he like started drinking less. Like, I don't think he drank a lot to begin with, but I think he started drinking less just because like, it wasn't something that we do in the house anymore.
Yeah. And I think for me, in my experience, is my fiance has learned how toxic alcohol is for the body, which is another thing. It's like really actually horrible for you. And it's a poison for your body. So not only are you affecting your mood that day, but you're also like destroying your body from the inside out. So like once we got more understanding and more education around it, even my friends and family, I think that's kind of spread out a little bit as an educational piece, because there's really not a lot of in-depth education about how bad it is for you. And it's so social, right? Like in our environment, in our daily life, it's so many businesses are on the backs of alcohol, restaurants, like livelihoods are. But I tell people now, I think if alcohol was invented today, it'd be illegal.
Yeah, right.
Which is kind of crazy to think about. But I mean, it's, it's so accepted across, everything we do, and anywhere from sports, parties, entertainment. It's just part of what people do. I did want to talk to you a little bit about Miami Learning Experience Center. I think you enjoy working with them. So what exactly do y'all do there?
Okay. So that goes back to like my teaching days. I met one of my colleagues at the school that I taught at. She volunteered with the Miami Learning Experience School, and she basically got my dance team to volunteer with them. That's how I got into it. I would like take my dance team and we would so Miami Learning Experience School is a school for children and adults with special needs, all types of special needs. And so the children and adults part of it is significant because they don't just take little kids, but they actually train adults with Down syndrome and a variety of other, special needs for living individually when it's possible. Miami Learning Experience School placed the first person with Down syndrome with a job in the state of Florida. And that was with Publix, which is our big like shopping center, grocery shopping center. And so they're doing great work, and like they have a full kitchen. They have like a mock apartment where children and adults with special needs learn how to do things like sorting materials, bagging items, like making a bed, like just very, very basic things. And they start as early as 4 years old. I believe it's 4. But I got in because they had a cheerleading team at the school, at the Miami Learning Experience School. And so my dance team would go and teach them little routines, and we would get to see like the girls and boys that were on the cheerleading team, like really just come to life. And a lot of these kids love to dance. They love music. They have incredible personalities. And so I was only volunteering with them in that capacity. And then I thought like, man, it makes me so happy like being around the community, the special needs community, brings me so much joy because it is like pure energy and innocence. They say what they think. They're not like caught up in what other people are thinking. They just want to be happy, and they just want to be in your presence. And it feels really good. So I started volunteering with one specific class when the kids were about like 5 or 6, and now they're like teenagers, and they still know who I am. You know, they ask about my husband, they ask about my kids, they know my kids' names. And I got to a point where I bought all in with them, and I became a co-chair for a campaign that they were doing. And I worked with another woman who I highly respect, Janelle Perez, who's now running for Senate in the state of Florida. And we worked together to raise this money so that they could build a new wing of their school. And, you know, I just think that they're doing great things for the special needs community. They have really caring teachers, really positive environment. And I leave there feeling like I was served. You know, it was something beautiful. Like it's a gift. It's like a reciprocal gift and I think that is a very big message of like life in general, because I feel like when I'm serving somebody else, like it comes back to me, you know, and that's not the intention. That's not why I think we have to be conscious of that. Like the why we're doing something. Like we're not doing something just to receive, right? I'm not going to school just so I can receive. I'm giving purely and intentionally. And the default of that is that I wind up receiving tenfold.
It really is amazing the way it makes you feel. I work closely with a special needs school here in Greenville called the Meyer Center. And it's mainly for, I think, probably around 3 to 4 till high school age. So it's not adults. But I tell people if they ever question what it is, I say, come take a tour with me.
Right.
And then you're sold.
Totally.
which is a big part of it. If people want to help, can they donate, or how could they get involved with it?
Yeah. So their website is mleschool.org, and there are volunteer positions, and they're continuing to raise money for their campaign where they can donate. I actually, like, for my wedding, we declined receiving gifts, and also for my kids' birthdays, we declined receiving gifts for our family. And we usually pick about 3 charities that we're passionate about, and we ask people to donate to which one feels best for them, within this umbrella of charities that we select. And so we've been able to raise good money for MLE, also for Lauren's kids, which is really important to me. And what Lauren Book is doing, and she's a Florida senator now, she raises awareness and provides education around childhood sexual abuse. And that's a very close subject for me. So love what she's doing. And we also work closely with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Miami.
Very cool. And all right, you've been very gracious, generous with your time. I have a segment of listener questions. We have 3 questions.
Okay.
So it's a little bit more fun. And first question, what is your favorite brand, if you have one?
Like what kind of brand? Like
fashion brand, clothing brand.
Clothing brand.
Mine would be Nike.
Okay, give me some perspective. It's so hard to say. I shop local a lot.
Okay.
And my favorite store to shop at in Miami is called The Showroom, and she carries like all kinds of really great, kind of under the radar, bigger brands, but under the radar. So it's like brands is called The Great, Nonchalant, you know. And then I like the big hitters too. Like I'm a sucker for high fashion just because I grew up loving and admiring fashion so much. So I'm always going to love like the luxury brands. All of the luxury brands are like super cool to me because I feel like it's wearing artwork.
Yep.
But on my day to day, I'm like super chill, sweatpants, hoodies, you know. I like Free People a lot.
Very cool. What was the name of the store?
It's called The Showroom Miami.
All right. Perfect. Okay. Second one.
The owner, Marilyn, she's amazing. So yes.
My sister owns a women's boutique here in my hometown. And so
cool.
I love it. But second question, favorite food or restaurant in Miami?
Okay. These are loaded questions, man. My favorite, I'm going to give you, I have a couple favorite foods. I'm like my son, I'm like, which is your favorite color? He's like, all the colors, all the colors.
It
And I'm like,
changes.
well, which is your favorite superhero? He's like, all the heroes. I'm like, I don't have a favorite, but my favorite foods are like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, croquetas. Do you know what those are? They're like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes, I love them.
Yes, love those. And I like pasta and pizza. And, I force myself to eat the salads, but I do really love a good salad. I really love a good salad. My favorite restaurant, I actually don't have one right now because I don't go out much. I really don't.
All right. That's fair enough. You have plenty of food there though. So last question, place you haven't traveled that you want to go with you and your husband or family.
I want to go to Greece. I want to go to Greece and I want to go to Australia. And we were planning to go to Paris. I've been to Paris before. We each individually have, but we haven't been together. So I'm hoping that we can go to Paris sometime soon. It seems very romantic to me.
Yes. I was talking with my fiance this morning. We want to go to Paris on our first on our first anniversary.
Oh, sweet. Yeah.
Well, Nikki, thank you so much for joining me. This has been an amazing conversation, hopefully an inspiring conversation or where somebody can hear it and it might be the right thing they need to hear at that time.
Thank you so much for having me, Sam.
Awesome. And we might do it again. Oh, and your podcast. Got to shout out your podcast.
Okay, so my podcast is called The Know with Nikki Spo. It's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you're listening to your podcasts, it's there. It's also streaming on YouTube. It's The Know with Nikki Spo. And basically, I am talking with women who are finding and celebrating their deepest inner knowing. We're having real life conversations about real life topics. Some of them are heavy, some of them are light and fun, but the goal is that you leave there feeling like empowered to go on and create the life of your dreams, and that more so that you deserve to do that. So
very true.
That's my podcast. You can find me on Instagram at Nikki Sap Spo and The Know with Nikki Spo.
And I'm going to put all those links, of course, in the show notes. This will be out on all the podcasting platforms, including YouTube. So Nikki, awesome. Thank you again. This has been an amazing conversation and thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Perfect.